Good afternoon. Welcome to a special session of the Ann Arbor City Council, August 4, 2021. May our clerk please read the order and notice of call a special session. Ms. Beaudry, you are inaudible.
Sorry.
No worries.
Notice is hereby given that an electronic special session of the City of Ann Arbor City Council will be held on Wednesday, August 4th, 2021 at 4:00 p.m. for the following purpose: a Rule 12 ethics hearing on complaint concerning Councilmember Hayner and a resolution regarding the outcome of the hearing and complaint.
Thank you. May I have, if you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Would our clerk please call the roll of council?
A reminder, if you're not in the City of Ann Arbor, to let us know. Councilmember Hayner?
Here.
Councilmember Dish?
Here.
Councilmember Griswold?
Here.
Councilmember Song? Absent. Councilmember Grand?
Here.
Councilmember Medina?
Here in Roscommon, Michigan.
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Councilmember Iyer?
Here in Lexington, Virginia.
Councilmember Nelson?
Here.
Councilmember Briggs?
Here.
Councilmember Omlawi?
Present.
We have a quorum.
DC 1, Rule 12 ethics hearing on complaint concerning Council Hayner. Moved by Councilmember Grand, second by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion, please, with respect to DC 1. This is a new ground for us, and so, Mr. Postma, perhaps if you could provide a description of the hearing procedures as you've sketched them.
Yes, I'll be happy to do that, Mayor. First of all, Mayor, it would be appropriate to provide some ground rules for the hearing. You could set some reasonable limitations on opening and closing statements and so on and so forth. The first requirement under the rule would be that Councilmember Hayner certainly has the right and opportunity to make an opening statement, and that should be granted to him. After that, the Council Administration Committee's case follows a certain format that would be introduced by the mayor, and the complaint would actually be brought forward. I believe that would be brought forward by Councilmember Grand, and it doesn't need to be elaborate, just simply what the case is about. Certainly after that, Councilmember Hayner has the ability to present evidence and witnesses in this case. Those evidence and witnesses shall speak directly and only to the request to reprimand an underlying complaint. Those witnesses will be sworn in by the mayor. And at that point, after that, Councilmember Hayner retains the right, again, under the rules, to make a closing statement. And after that, there can be a consideration of any resolution that the council deems fit.
Thank you. And I guess I would propose, in terms of reasonable time limits, that the opening and closing statements be limited to 10 minutes. I'd expect the Administration Committee's case in chief to be similarly limited, and Councilmember Hayner, if he wishes, with respect to evidence and presentation, 20 minutes is a target that I would suggest. If we need more time, we can, of course, talk that through.
Well, Mayor, I think on that point, you might ask Councilmember Hayner, whether there'll be witnesses or other. What's the scope of what he wants to do before imposing a time limit?
Councilmember Hayner.
I don't have any comment on that. I'm sticking with the notion that one is innocent until proven otherwise. I don't even have an open remark. I didn't call this meeting. I don't think this is a necessary activity we're engaging in here this afternoon. So let's just get on with it, shall we?
Well, I think my point was I've gone through the procedure.
I don't have any witnesses.
Thank you. Before moving on to the council member's opening statement, which precedes the administration committee's presentation, I'd like to provide advance notice to members of the public that this hearing engages the question of a racial slur. I've been advised that we are not able to prevent the utterance of that slur during the course of this hearing. I nevertheless recommend and request that no council member actually use the term due to the harm the word causes to individuals in the community. Thank you. Now, Councilmember Hayner, it's your opportunity to make an opening statement.
I prefer that these absurd charges be read first, but I'm happy to point out that any of my use of language outside of this body really is none of this body's business. And the conversation that I had with the gentleman that brought this all to your attention was in the context of him asking me when cannot these words, various words that are recognized as words that are used every day in our society, in fact, be used. And it was wholly in that context that the word was used. In fact, the word was my mention of the word was simply saying, was this person I was having this conversation with aware that it has been used in many instances? And in fact, there is a title of a song, which I then stated that had this word in it. And we spoke about that for a while. We spoke about several words in their use, and it was all wholly in context and wholly appropriate. And I thought it was kind of curious that then a couple weeks later at the Free Palestine March, this same reporter came up to me and wanted to let me know in person that he wasn't offended by my use of the word, and he appreciated our conversation and the education and the back and forth that we had, and it was all fine and well with him. And so I don't see this being a real problem. I think this is an overreach, and folks who don't are going to pretend to not recognize the difference between use and mention and the contextual use of language, and when it is appropriate and not appropriate to say certain words are being intellectually dishonest. And it's a shame that this is something that we're taking up the public and our own time with at this point. So that's all I have to say. So let's get on with it.
Thank you, Council Member. It's now time for the Council Administration Committee's case in chief. At this time, I will ask the complainant, Councilmember Grand, to describe the nature of her complaint, of the complaint.
Thank you, Mayor. I initiated a formal request for a reprimand of Councilmember Hayner for a violation of Council Ethics Rule 13. My request for a reprimand references an MLive article entitled "Jeff Hayner Not Backing Down from Debate Over Offensive Language as Recall Petition Moves Forward." This was written by journalist Samuel J. Robinson. Mr. Robinson then reported that Councilmember Hayner, and I'll quote, "used the N-word in its entirety," stating that, quote, "he prefers to use the actual words instead of abbreviations or euphemisms," end quote. Mr. Robinson also reported that in that same interview, Councilmember Hayner repeated the N-word in its entirety, elaborating on his view that, quote, "these words just don't go away because people who are offended by them," end quote. To my knowledge, Councilmember Hayner has neither denied these allegations, both preceding this statement today and then in his opening statement, nor apologized for the alleged use of such language. Based on this evidence, I believe that it's more likely than not that Councilmember Hayner used these racial slurs. I believe Councilmember Hayner's use of these racial slurs is a violation of Council Ethics Rule 13, which provides in part that, quote, "council members should avoid the use of derogatory and denigrating language," end quote. So in conclusion, and I apologize if there's any background noise, Councilmember Hayner should be reprimanded for the use of this harmful language.
Mayor, you're not on.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Member. That That concludes the facts as presented to the Administration Committee and concludes the Administration Committee's case in chief. Councilmember Hayner, you've previously indicated that you do not wish to present witnesses. Now is the opportunity for you to indeed present evidence and witnesses. Do you continue to decline the opportunity to present evidence and witnesses?
Well, a reporter should not be compelled to come here and sit before this, whatever's going on here, to sit before this hearing and have that conversation. So I thought it would have been inappropriate to ask him to. As I said, we spoke on occasions after this article was written, and he expressed to me quite fully that he was not offended by our conversation whatsoever. And he wanted to let me know that in person. I thought that was decent of him to come up, and we had a nice wide-ranging conversation that day. And, he wasn't offended by it. It wasn't used in an offensive manner. It was mentioned as a title of a song and in a very specific and narrow use, indeed, around the very topic of when can these words be said and when should they not be said? It wasn't yelled by me at someone on the street. It wasn't directed towards anyone. It was in a very narrow use. And if that use of speech, if that language is something that this body thinks is a violation of its rules, I think we need to take a hard look at our rules, because they have gone off the edge of sensibility and off the edge of decency. When we are banning the use of words, we are into some shaky territory here. And I think it's outrageous that we would even consider doing it. And I have, of course, I said that word. I said it in a very certain context, in a very certain way, with another adult on a phone call. And somehow that is the big disaster we have here in our community. It's not about our poison water, our COVID epidemic, our crumbling roads, our structural deficit. It's about Jeff said a word on a phone call. That's what we're wasting our time on here. Well, let's just get on with it, shall we? Because this is really something to take a hard look at yourselves here, everybody. I know that language isn't appropriate in some cases, in some instances, and in some communities and social groups, it's practically a pronoun. I grew up in those communities, but I don't even use it like that. So this is much ado about nothing here, and I think you all know that. That's all I have to say. This is just more nonsense from a council that likes to bully people.
Councilmember, that was during your time to present evidence and witnesses. And
yeah, I don't have any evidence. I don't have any witnesses. I've said
Fair
that
point,
for the fourth time.
I understand that, but I need to observe that was your time to do that. Is it fair for us to consider that prior statement as your closing statement?
Listen, I could have brought 100 people in here to stand up for my character and the work I've done and my active anti-racism and everything else. But that's not what we're talking about. You're talking about punishing me for the use of a word that's very narrow here. I admit I said that word in a very specific context that I believe was appropriate in a conversation with another adult. And that's all I have to say about it.
I'm barring your objection. I'm going to conclude that I'm going to take the position that was your closing statement. Is that all right?
Fine.
Thank you. There is I guess there is an opportunity for the Administration Committee to have a rebuttal prior to closing statement, but since those have been conflated, I'm going to conclude that the Administration Committee does not require an opportunity for rebuttal. We have heard the closing statement, and Mr. Postum, is it proper then for me to conclude that the hearing in chief is ended, and it is now appropriate to move over to DC2?
Yes.
Thank you. DC1 is concluded. DC2, resolution regarding outcome of the hearing and complaint. Moved by Councilmember Grand, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion, please, at DC2. Councilmember Grant.
Thank you, Mayor. I have forwarded a resolution to the clerk and would ask if she would be willing to share it with the body.
I would recommend that be read in.
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course.
During the course of it being passed around, Councilmember, perhaps you can read it.
Absolutely, I can. I apologize. Okay, so the title of the resolution is Resolution to Reprimand Councilmember Hayner for a violation of Council Ethics Rule 13. Whereas on May 12th, 2021, an article written by journalist Samuel J. Robinson entitled, quote, Jeff Hayner not backing down from debate over offensive language as recall petition moves forward, end quote, was posted on MLive. Whereas Mr. Robinson reported that Councilmember Hayner, quote, used the N-word in its entirety, end quote, stating that, quote, he prefers to use the actual words instead of abbreviations or euphemisms. There should be an end quote there. I think that's a Scrivener's error. I apologize. Whereas it is also reported in the same interview, Councilmember Hayner repeated the N-word, elaborating on his view that, quote, these words just don't go away because people who are offended by them, end quote. Whereas the presence of a council member who voices racial slurs creates harm to the community, distances community members from their government, and degrades the efficacy of local government. Whereas a complaint requesting reprimand of Councilmember Hayner for his use of this language was filed by myself with the chair of the Council Administration Committee, whereas at the direction of the council, a Rule 12 ethics hearing was held on August 4th, 2021 to review the complaint and report for reprimand under Council Ethics Rule 12 4DII, and whereas at the hearing, the Council Administrative Committee presented evidence of the alleged conduct and Councilmember Hayner attended and presented a defense, resolved that having heard the evidence presented during the hearing, Council finds that it is more likely than not that Councilmember Hayner used racial slurs in violation of Council Ethics Rule 13, and resolved that the Ann Arbor City Council reprimand Councilmember Hayner for the use of racial slurs in violation of Council Ethics Rule 13.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Councilmember Grand, you still have the floor.
I think I've said what I needed to say. Thank you.
Sorry, repeat.
Oh, I'll be happy to have others speak on this. I think the resolution states it pretty clearly.
Councilmember Ramlawi.
Yeah, I will just say that I'm not able to get any emails right now. For some reason, I've been blocked by the city's IT department. So I'm not receiving any emails as of the last 2 hours. So I will not be receiving any emails until I get this problem fixed.
Further discussion of the motion. Councilmember Griswold.
I'd like to amend to remove what I believe is the fourth whereas clause, whereas the presence of a council member who voices racial slurs creates harm to the community, distances community members from their government, and degrades the efficacy of local government. The reason I'm asking to strike that is I believe that much more harm has been done by council's actions than were done by the single conversation. And to imply the harm from that one conversation versus all of the political posturing that has occurred over many months is troubling to me.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Nelson. Further discussion of the amendment.
Oh, just that's not friendly.
Councilmember Ramlawi. I'm sorry, Councilmember Hayner, are you participating in this?
I believe that I need to, under our council rules, that I need to ask to be recused from any kind of votes on these matters. Isn't that correct?
I believe so.
Yes,
You
I certainly agree with the statement that was just made, but.
Understood. Can we, does anyone object as a sidebar if we engage Councilmember Hayner's request to be?
No,
That's fine.
I think he'd be allowed to participate in the discussion and just not vote. That would be correct.
As you wish. Rather, as advised. Councilmember Hayner or Councilmember Amlawi on the amendment.
Again, I don't have any thing in front of me other than the verbal acknowledgement of what's being put forth. I don't have access to email. I can't see anything. I won't be voting on anything I can't see right now.
Councilmember Nelson.
I don't know if who's the appropriate person to ask this question of, but relevant to the fourth whereas clause and I guess other clauses that refer to racial slurs. I'm identifying racial slurs I'm seeing definitions of racial slurs as insulting a group of people, and I guess I am curious in the context of a conversation about words, who was insulted in this conversation? We've not really heard any evidence of the person actually being insulted around the use of words. If I were to have a conversation with somebody who was learning English and wanted to know like the worst word to never ever say, and I were to say this word, I don't believe that in that context it would be insulting to anyone because it is conversation around words. So insofar as a racial slur implies an insult, I guess I'm looking to how Mr. Robinson was insulted, or I've not heard any evidence of that. So I'm trying to I'm really struggling here with along the lines of what Councilmember Griswold has said, the repetition and the reframing of this in a very political way has certainly caused a different kind of harm than the actual conversation, because we've not heard any evidence of the conversation itself causing harm.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you, and I apologize for the background noise. The first thing I wanted to say is just sort of procedural. If Councilmember Ramlawi is having difficulties with email, and I know there were some new security protocols put in place today, perhaps someone could share do a screen share of the resolution so that he can participate, so he can read it and participate as necessary. I would hate to have him not be able to participate in the vote because of a technical difficulty. Second thing is to Councilmember Nelson's question, we haven't heard any testimony here, but we've received many emails as a body from people in our community who expressed that they felt that there was harm from this language, from this the language being used in a newspaper article, and not just that the language was used, but also that that it's been maintained by the council member, that he has a right to use it, and that if people are offended, so be it. So we have heard plenty of evidence from people in the community, including Black leaders, that there's been harm created and that they feel distanced from their government because of it.
Ms. Beaudry?
Sorry about that. I just wanted to clarify that I did ask IT to reach out to Councilmember Ramlawi.
Is the resolution on Legistar?
I just received it, but I can, if you give me about 5 minutes, I can get it out on Legistar if that would help.
I think it would help.
The IT help desk manager should be reaching out to Councilmember Ramlawi as well.
Okay, perhaps also
share it on the screen.
Perhaps also there's a separate email address that Councilmember Ramlawi can receive an attachment. This is not a privileged document. Councilmember Ramlawi, do you have an additional email address that? Councilmember, you are inaudible.
First initial, last name at yahoo.com. If someone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Beaudry, you got that? Thank you very much. On the amendment, I'm going to vote against the amendment. Of course, I don't, require a line of witnesses or a survey or really, anything to know that the word is indeed a racial slur and that the word does indeed cause harm when, well, period. Councilmember Hayner.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing you've said there, Mr. Mayor, because that certainly doesn't follow the rules of this proceeding. And I think we know it's a fait accompli what's going to happen here anyway. You're going to vote for it no matter what evidence was presented. I mean, it's obvious what's going on here, I think, to everyone watching and everyone who's going to see this and read about it later. But I didn't receive any inordinate number of emails. In fact, I'm struggling to recall receiving one email from anyone saying shame on you for saying this. So all these, maybe you should have read some into the record or something, because I'm having a hard time believing that there was an outpouring of anguish in our community and you couldn't wrestle up one person to come in here and say something under the rules of the hearing. It's shocking. And we certainly could have arranged a hearing to have public comment, to let folks call in and say something prior to your voting. And as you said, Mr. Mayor, you don't need any evidence to know that it's a slur. Well, of course we know it's a slur, but in certain contexts it isn't. And that was the context in which it was used. And again, I think that this notion that there are some words that shall not be uttered. I mean, what is this? This isn't a Tolkien novel here. This is real life, where people say things and do things and act in ways that you may or may not approve of. But it happens, it happens.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I'll just hard disagree that I think there are some words that shall not be uttered. I think that's just a clear point of disagreement and part of why we're here today. I also, think that it's not up to those who've been harmed and are most marginalized to have to stand up to someone who puts them in a position of harm and have to explain to a majority community why they were harmed or why that word was offensive. That's not an education that needs to happen at this hearing. So I think it's our job as council members who represent certain values in this community to do what we think is right. I think it's really just that simple. And I find it somewhat shocking that certain members of this body find that our reaction to this is more problematic than the act itself.
What act is that?
Councilmember?
What act?
Councilmember?
I guess you missed your chance to ask me direct questions. The
act of uttering a word.
Councilmember, please don't interrupt.
It's fine. So anyway, that's all I have to say. We did our own outreach into the community. We had conversations. We received emails. I've even seen discussions, including from the journalist himself, that suggests that this was not just using a word. Thanks.
Councilmember Romlawi on the amendment.
Well, I'm not sure what the amendment is. I apologize. I just got the email from our clerk. Thank you.
The amendment is to remove the fourth resolved clause. Pardon me, my error. The amendment is to remove the fourth whereas clause.
I agree. I don't see the need to strike it here on my first look at it. I feel that the question here, there's many questions, and I think many things are being conflated. There's one word that sticks out, in the memorandum we received from Mr. Postman earlier today, and that's preponderance, the word preponderance. And I think that's a very key word for me here today is preponderance. And we've heard the council member admit to using the word in the context which he described. We are being asked whether this is a violation of Rule 13. And I apologize, but I'll need to ask this again since there's been much focus paid on rules by this new council, more so than many other issues facing the city. Rule 13, is this the latest rule of unbecoming of a council member that was recently adopted?
I believe the complaint was about using derogatory terms, but I can get you could ask the complainant.
That's correct.
And again, I think we've heard that when used with that purpose and intent, of course, that whereas clause is true. So I have no problem leaving that whereas clause. I'll talk more as it relates to other parts, but when it comes to this amendment change, I'll keep it what it is.
Councilmember Griswold.
I just want to remind the group here that we need to be dealing with the facts and not hearsay and secondhand information. At least I can ask Mr. Postma is if we can enter into evidence or consider secondhand, third-hand information at this time.
Yeah, the judicial rules of evidence don't apply in a hearing like this, and so as we've set out, so that those types of things about hearsay and so on would not apply. Certainly, those things could be taken into account if on the issue of preponderance of the evidence, which means really the standard. Just so you understand, it means that the evidence must persuade the council that is more likely than not that what happened is true, and so that's certainly for you to decide. But the rules that you're referring to, hearsay and other things, really are not applicable here.
Okay, so you're saying we can take hearsay into account?
Well, hearsay is a rule of evidence in the court. Here, the underlying complaint is based on a newspaper article, and you've had the person who was in the meeting about the newspaper article was here to testify as to his version of what happened. So those are the things that you now have in evidence.
Oh, okay. The reporter is not testifying, just Councilmember Hayner.
Right. The reporter is the reporter's. The reporter is not needed to establish what happened in the sense that his article in and of itself was the basis of the complaint. So in that sense, you can look at that and consider that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Heener on the amendment.
Yeah, I just want to bring Councilman Romali up to speed. Council Ethics Rule 13 is indeed a new rule that was created here. This is the kind of partial list of council behavioral norms, including the partial list of various tenets from IMCA Code of Ethics that were adopted by this body. And so, yeah, this is a new rule. And I think the one they're talking about in this, specifically in this whereas clause, is number 4. Well, although they're bulleted, they're not numbered, but it's bullet point 4 is avoid the use of derogatory and denigrating language. I assume that's what the problem is here. And, it doesn't say thou shalt not. It's not the Bible, right? And so you can avoid it until a reporter calls you and says, let's talk about the use of derogatory and denigrating language. And then it's difficult to avoid that. So you know, just let's just hang that out there. You guys decide. I mean, some of you would never, you know, how dare you say a word that's uttered millions of times a day, right? So in all kinds of ways and means, and not in any of those ways by me, only in the context of a conversation about the very use of language. So, you know, I don't, you know, this reporter was trying to catch me so he could get a fancy headline. Fine, that's his job, you know. I don't hold that against him or anybody else. That's what reporters do, you know. But you know, I'm telling you what that conversation was about and what the context was, and you can choose to believe me or not.
Councilmember Nelson, Briggs, and Radine, and can I ask council members to stick with this particular amendment, and we can talk more about the balance of the resolution after we resolve the amendment. Councilmember Nelson.
Quickly, I just wanted to make a similar clarification that this is a rule that was brought to the administrative committee in April, and it was passed on May 3rd. This is entirely new to our rules as of 3 months ago. I just wanted to clarify that.
Councilmember Briggs.
To the amendment, I am somewhat shocked that there is any discussion about removing this fourth whereas clause. Just to, again, read it. The presence of a council member who voices racial slurs creates harm to the community, distances community members from their government, and degrades the efficacy of local government. Of any statement that is within this resolution, I would think that every single one of us could agree to that statement.
Councilmember Radina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope you can hear me. My Wi-Fi is pretty bad today. I will also not be supporting removing of this, just in addition to everything Councilmember Briggs just said eloquently about the broadness of this statement, and frankly, the fact that I'm also surprised that there's any question around whether or not this is something that we could all subscribe to. This is to the suggestion that this word was being used in some broad academic context. I feel some framing is necessary in that, you know, as Councilmember Hayner pointed out, this is about derogatory and denigrating language, and this was in an article that was in response to other derogatory and denigrating language. The fact that community members were offended by this is clear by the community response that has taken place, both at this table and in the political sphere. We've heard from residents who have called in, we've heard from residents individually, and we saw a political response to it as well. It is clear that community members were offended, and so it's shocking to me that this is a debate around whether or not the use of this particular word offended people in our community.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. On the amendment, it is, I will not be supporting it. It's very clear to me that, you know, a vote to support this amendment is a vote to say that it is somehow more harmful to call out racist language than to actually use racist language. And that is something that we see happen a lot around our country. It is not something we usually see happen in democratic circles, in progressive circles. So, you know, I hope that we're better than that and that we'll vote this amendment down and maintain that calling out racist language is the right and proper thing to do.
Councilmember Griswold, you've spoken twice about the amendment to my records.
Yes, I'd like to ask for an exception given the personal attacks that I have endured in the last few seconds.
You've not received, Councilmember, there have been no personal attacks. It's been
Okay, I'll take the arrows out later. Thank you.
Further discussion of the amendment. Ms. Beaudry, who is on point today?
Today will be Councilmember Dish.
My apologies. Thank you. Councilmember Dish. Roll call, please, on the amendment, starting with Councilmember Dish.
Councilmember Dish,
No.
Councilmember Griswold,
Yes.
Councilmember Song,
No.
Councilmember Grand,
No.
Councilmember Medina,
No.
Mayor Taylor,
No.
Councilmember Iyer,
No.
Councilmember Nelson,
No.
Councilmember Briggs,
No.
Councilmember Ramlawi,
No.
Councilmember Hayner,
Mr.
Council
Postma?
rules, I'm going to
Yeah.
abstain.
I think that Councilmember Hayner's asked to, under the rules, he would not make a vote on this, so we would not be voting on an amendment. So that's a proper response.
Okay, abstaining. Motion fails.
Further discussion, the main motion. Councilmember Griswold.
I believe that some of the language here, while it is true, does not apply to this situation. And so to portray anyone who does not agree with all this language to be racist and other non-democratic creatures is not in the best spirit of our council.
Councilmember Song.
I think this conversation would be entirely different if we actually had a Black City Council member at this table. So let me remind folks of the statement that I wrote back in June in response to this when this first came up, and the work that I did in communicating with our local NAACP and Black leaders and my own constituents who said, I can put my neck out and speak out against this. Why do I have to? Why isn't this obvious? When it's obvious to my children, when it's obvious, to their peers and what they're taught here in Ann Arbor Public Schools, when it's obvious to folks in their place of work. Let me read this to refresh your memory from June. This is one statement from a mother of two biracial children. We are so tired of having to fight to be heard. We are trying to raise our children, survive the pandemic, memorialize community members lost through violence and the virus. And yet City Council is saying not only that our feelings don't matter, but they can speak on our behalf. That is not right. Do not victimize us. Another comment from another parent. It is demoralizing when it's predetermined that First Amendment rights trumps all when we expect officials to speak and act as allies. Why do you expect victims of racial slurs to defend ourselves and fight alone? In this day and hour, officials must be held to a different standard. The fact that there's back and forth on this is incredible. Does City Council believe it's defensible to use racial slurs in meetings with constituents at their place of work? And we know this. We know the answers to this, and yet we're dancing around as if there's any situation where this is acceptable language, welcomed language in the year 2021 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I think I would hope that it's a pretty clear path towards what we decide today, because when we answer our constituents on what this discussion was like and who actually worked with community and sought out what the impact was with this kind of language, published language, unrepentant language, then I wish you luck, because you have these relationships with community members. These are our neighbors, our colleagues, our loved ones. If we don't have folks who have shared their hurt directly with us as elected leaders, then you need to expand your network and listen closely. I also want to say another thing is that there was another hearing today. We are here in the seat of privilege, speaking and allowing this courtesy to happen when we had another hearing for a young Black man in Ward 1 today, where there's like two parallel universes here. He does not have that opportunity, and here we are dancing around this as if it's not obvious. It's so sad.
Councilmember Amlawi.
I'm not sure if my colleague can see, but I'm not dancing. We are not here to discuss whether this language is harmful, whether it causes distress, whether it should be avoided and not used. That's not what I'm here today. That's not what I'm taking my time out of being an elected official to decide. We have so much going on in our community right now, more so after last week's terrible decision. We're being brought here to ask about Rule 12 and these last two resolve clauses of this proposed legislation. No one is debating. Nobody is debating that this language is abhorrent. Nobody here. So please quit saying that. Quit manipulating and bullying this discussion and conversation and others who sit in these seats. I'm looking at these last two resolve clauses in this resolution as an elected official who swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the state's Constitution, and our city charter. That's what I'm supposed to do, okay? And that's what I'm trying to do. Not going to be manipulated and framed.
Order. I
in
would
ways
suggest that Councilmember Ramlawi is engaging in a
directly
personal
honest.
attack against Councilmember Song.
I have not named anybody. I am expressing my opinions.
I'm going to concur that there are no names named.
So, we're looking at whether there's a preponderance of evidence to suggest Council Hayner used racial slurs in violation of Rule 13. That's what we should be looking at right now. And that's the evidence that we should be listening to. And right now, I'm trying to make sense of it. And what I'm hearing is things that don't pertain to these last two resolve clauses and to Rule 13, which was recently adopted. And before the bullet point that comes to the avoid the use of derogatory and denigrating language, it also, in the second bullet point, encouraged the free expression of opinion and policy by all council members. Now, I don't use this language, but I tell you what, if I turned on my radio, I will hear that word on station 44, 45, and 46 on Sirius XM radio. Okay? I go to the club. I'm going to hear it on the club, on the dance floor. Okay? I can turn on Comedy Central. It's on Comedy Central.
Councilmember?
Dave Chappelle next week, and he's going to be using it in his act. Okay? So I just don't get where all this is going and the time that we're taking away from government.
Councilmember Nelson.
I just want to say that the only way that this conversation works in a finger-pointing way to call each other racist and say this should be easy is when you actually turn this incident into something that it wasn't. This was not about the use of this word in a council meeting or whether anyone is doubting how this word would be offensive in 1,000 other contexts. That's not our conversation. So sticking to the conversation in front of us, since a new council was elected, we have had exactly 17 regular council meetings, 17. Of those 17, new proposed rules have landed on 5 agendas. Agenda items related to Mr. Hayner have now been on 3 agendas, plus this special session. I've seen suggestions that Mr. Hayner is to blame for wasting our time with distractions. This is exactly what a majority of this council has chosen for our agenda, not just at this meeting, but at 8 other council meetings. A majority of council has explicitly chosen this focus for their work. Making rules to target specific colleagues is exactly the point. This hearing is based on a rule that a majority of council passed on May 3rd. The work of this council was the foundation of a failed recall effort, which collected over $11,000 from fewer than 60 people. I am not interested in conversations that my colleagues have with reporters or on social media. Colleagues have said ridiculous things about me in various places, presumably in the hopes that it would reflect badly on me. But I am not interested in bringing a notarized complaint about things that my colleagues say. We have better things to do. It might be time to accept that all of us were elected to serve on this council, and outside of truly extreme circumstances or an intervention from voters by recall, all of us will remain here until our next election.
Councilmember Griswold.
I want to give some background just to let you know that when I speak, I know that we are in a racist community. I know that because I have had biracial foster children that I've advocated for years. I have mentored 4 Black males that now have degrees from the University of Michigan. I have been fighting for minorities most of my life. My stepfather was a member of the Chippewa tribe. So to imply that some of us don't really understand what's happening here, and what people tell me is that there's nothing worse than affluent, righteous, intellectual white people playing the race card for their own political advantage. Let's worry about our minorities. Let's worry about the people that are not as well off during this pandemic as we are. And I believe that a slur means that you are targeting a person. That is not what happened. This was a discussion about some words, not the use of a word to denigrate or to attack an individual.
Councilmember Adina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be brief because I will repeat that I do believe that this should be easy. The rule in question is whether or not to avoid the use of derogatory and denigrating language. I think we heard both in his opening and closing statement. Councilmember Hayner has readily admitted to using this word. He has not apologized for it. He has not walked it back. I think there's a lot of questioning at this table whether or not the context of that word matters. And I will again repeat that this was not in a classroom in an academic sense talking about whether or not words are appropriate. This was an article in response to other denigrating and derogatory language that was used. For me, this is easy. It is language that is inappropriate in all contexts in this case. And I will also say that, I think there has also been some effort to suggest that this is about, shutting down free speech or being interested in the language that our council members use outside of the table. But the reality is this is council's use of free speech. This is the exact way that we should handle instances like this. When hate speech is used, often the answer to that is more speech. And that is what this body can do by passing this reprimand and saying that this speech is unacceptable to our council.
Councilmember Dish.
I think that we all appreciate the gravity of this word and other words that were used. I think that one of the things that's being debated today, I was going to say around this table, but we're still not around a table, is which context should count. And I think that you could make a technical argument that the immediate context of Mr. Hayner's utterance was not, and he did not use the word as an assault on a person. So we could talk about the immediate context. But I think others of us, or perhaps I should only speak for myself, take this word in a broader context, and and I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, there's the context of slavery in which this word was used to dehumanize and degrade. and to reconcile with American principles of freedom and equality the enslavement of Black people. And then there's the context of lynching, which is a closer context to our time, where this word was used to excite white mobs. The word carries that history, and I am in no way saying that anyone here would celebrate slavery or advocate lynching. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the word carries the weight of that history, and it is a word that many Black academics feel that white people should not use. And it's a word that I think that white leaders should not use because we are representatives, and the words that come out of our mouths and even the tone that we use when we speak, we are not just speaking for ourselves, we are speaking for those who have chosen us to represent them. And so I think we have a more limited vocabulary as representatives. We have to be more watchful about our speech and more careful about our tone. And so I will be supporting the resolution. And that's all I'd like to say.
Councilmember Saul.
So allow me to propose the idea that Councilmember Hayner is not the victim of his own choices and words that he uses, and that he actually has choices. And that we have choices to uplift communities, to inspire communities. This is an incredible language. Let me share the words of Grace Lee Boggs. We must have the courage to walk the talk, but we must also engage in the continuing dialogues that enable us to break free of old categories and create the new ideas that are necessary to address our realities. Because revolutions are made not to prove the correctness of ideas, but to begin anew. And this is what I'm hoping for today as we begin anew. And that anew is that we demonstrate that this language has no context by an elected official in any capacity, federal, local, police, staff. There's no context. There's no context where it's acceptable, where it's welcomed. You have choices. You have access. You have privilege. You have the power of your words and your actions. And I hope that I can return to community members who read this, who had to explain to their children that their representative used this word, that we were able to say, it is not intolerant of us why people of color should not be tolerant of hate. That is not the test for our city and for ourselves and for each other. So I welcome this opportunity to demonstrate care for our community. Thank you.
Councilmember Iyer.
I am so saddened by this discussion and by what I'm seeing on my screen. A white council member rolling her eyes at a person of color on our body as she's speaking about harm done by racist language. It is absolutely, I'm sorry, Councilmember Song, that you're having to deal with this.
I'm fine. I'm fine, thank you. But
you're
I'm
strong.
fine,
thank you. And I'm sorry for our community. I cannot believe that in Ann Arbor, this is not a unanimous vote to simply say that it's not okay for a council member to use this word. I've heard Councilmember Hayner say it's hard to avoid using this word sometimes. I
never said that.
I think we can roll the tape and learn.
Let's roll the tape.
Councilmember,
I have the floor. Thank you. I can honestly say I've never uttered this word in my life. I'm not sure I could make.
I can honestly say that is a lie.
Councilmember.
So, I've heard a council.
Councilmember, please do not interrupt the speaker.
I've heard a council member say, we hear this word on the radio, so it should be okay. No, none of these things are excuses, are reasons. We've heard from our community, and no council member here can say we haven't. We've received the emails as a body from folks who said they were harmed. This is a really easy, this should be a really easy vote. And the fact that it's not, it just makes me sad.
Councilmember Nelson.
I just like to help in the honesty of this discussion. This is not a conversation about whether it's wrong to use this word and whether this decision is a pronouncement of it being wrong. Will be the third vote in response to this event. Maybe it will be the second. I don't know how many conversations we're going to have along these lines where we're talking about A and everybody talks about B. I think it's worth pointing out, since we are talking about emails, Councilmember Hayner has lived in this community for 30 years. 30 years. As much as this has been thrown around as evidence of a bigoted, biased, terrible person he is, that should have prompted an outpouring of emails to us from people who know Mr. Hayner and could say, I am so glad he is finally exposed for the horrible person that he is. I don't believe that I've gotten one email like that. I've gotten many emails from people who do not know Councilmember Hayner and have been told that he used this language and he's likely a bigoted person. The comments that I have heard from people of color who actually know Mr. Hayner are, why did you vote to strip him of all of his appointments? Why would you do that? I appreciate that we can have a broad discussion and throw implications around all that we want. But I challenge anyone, has anyone received an email from somebody who says, I know Councilmember Hayner. I've known him for a long time. And yes, I'm so glad he's finally getting caught up and pegged for who he really is. I suspect that none of us have gotten an email like that. And to somebody else's point, no, I'm not suggesting that Councilmember Hayner is a victim in this case. We are all sitting in privileged positions and we're taking our shots like everybody else. I mean, people are passing out rocks to throw at us. That doesn't make us victims.
Councilmember.
But this is a serious conversation, and we should be able to talk seriously about it and about the issue at hand instead of inventing new issues that are not the issue.
Councilmember Grant.
My apologies. I think we should be talking about the issue at hand. It's not about how long Councilmember Hayner has lived in the community and if he has friends that are part of certain groups, or it's about this act. And as someone who did have to submit a notarized, it's interesting that got called out, a notarized form as part, because that's part of the process here. I don't want to be spending my time doing this. And if Councilmember Hayner would have just stopped after the first slur and issued a real apology and stopped this behavior.
Objection.
Yeah,
Councilmember, please don't interrupt.
Keep interrupting me. You think that phases me? You should know better. Does anyone think that I actually wanted to spend time away from my family or my other work or the work of this body? Nod your head and roll your eyes. We get it. No, absolutely not. There's a lot of policy that I'd rather be spending time on than this garbage. But when it happened, it's our responsibility as a body to respond to it because there was harm. And that's what we're talking about today. The harm that was caused by this action, not a history in a community, not if you have the right to reclaim certain language, which as a white person, you do not have a right to reclaim that word because you don't have a claim on it. And so I would like us to just get to the vote at hand, which is, and the evidence is clear. Councilmember Hayner did it. There was harm. And I hope that he just stops. I mean, seriously, Jeff, please stop. And then we don't have to spend our time doing this. I'd like this to be the last one, and I'd like us to move forward and focus on policy from here on out. But the fact that Councilmember Nelson believes that I actually take joy in this or want to spend my time on it, you know, some of us choose to write lots and lots of words. Some of us choose to just get stuff done. I hope we can start getting stuff done.
Councilmember Umlawi.
You know, I'm shocked to just hear Councilmember Grand call this garbage. You brought a sworn complaint on a very serious issue, and then you
Point
just
of order, the
described it
behavior
as
was garbage, not the actual response.
That's not a point of order.
You know, so yeah, I'm taking time out of my busy life. You know, I'm not able to work remotely. I'm struggling to keep what I've worked 30 years alive and well. And in fact, it does provide a lot to this community, way more than many of the folks I see on the screen here today. The problem here, among many other problems, is a lack of trust. And colleagues already said it earlier, how this should be unanimous, 11-0. You're absolutely right, it should be. If there was trust, if there was fact, if there was evidence to show the preponderance of violation of Rule 13, there was an act actually committed that same day, actually prior, when the first post by Councilmember Hayner drew attention, and that was April 10th. There was someone else on this body who posted something April 10th, and it starts off this. This FOIA re-traumatizes a domestic violence survivor who happens to be a public official. It is harmful
Point of order.
to
Point of
survivors,
order,
including
Mayor. Point of order.
FOIA jurisdiction
Councilmember?
beneath contempt.
Point of order, Mayor. This is off topic.
Councilmember, it's important that we speak exclusively to this.
I'll be bringing it because I brought
Point of
this
order.
issue up at an admin committee meeting as well. But I decided not to follow through with it because I believe my constituents
Point of order, Mayor. We are.
to do something more,
Councilmember,
not to take up these
Stick to the-
issues and take up our time on city council.
please stick to the resolution at hand.
It takes away from the business at hand. The other day I read off, and I'll continue, and I got it right here. We have a list of problems in our community. We have a growing list of issues in our community that this council has yet to address with the kind of attention and time that it's taken on this issue, including the dioxin, PFAS, infrastructure problems, carbon neutrality, housing, affordable housing, the DDAs. We got so much stuff to be working on.
Councilmember, you're at time. And I've given you some extra time because of the
Thank you. I
questions
appreciate
with
it.
respect to points of order. Councilmember Hayner.
I think that some folks might consider that the way that some of us on this body twist each other's words and language for their own goals could be characterized by some as beneath contempt.
Further discussion of the main motion? We spend a lot of time doing a lot of different things. The notion that we as a council, as a municipal organization, don't spend time focusing on the people's business is simply not true. And frankly, as a matter of policy and mere numbers, ridiculous. It's also true that we have spent now at least 3 resolutions with respect to Councilmember Hayner's statements, and those are regrettable. It's not regrettable because it's an overstep on the part of the body. It's regrettable because It's shocking that a council member should have uttered speech that gives rise to the necessity of addressing these issues. The voicing of racial and homophobic slurs is 100% unacceptable. The N-word, which is at issue here today, is an unspeakable obscenity used for centuries and to this day to demean and dehumanize and to enforce and perpetuate white supremacy. It is taboo and simply not to be uttered, period. And the voicing of this word by an elected official on the record, off the record, any context, is simply unacceptable, and I do not accept it. It severs community members from their government and creates deep harms that will not abate on their own. The action of this council to reprimand, first to call for the resignation of, and then to formally reprimand, is an effort to bridge that gap between the people harmed and their government. It's a deeply necessary act. But it is necessary because the harm has been created and we as grown-ups have to deal with it. I'm going to vote in favor of the resolution. Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, on the main motion, starting with Councilmember Dish.
Councilmember Dish,
Yes.
Councilmember Griswold,
No.
Councilmember Song,
Yes.
Councilmember Grand,
Yes.
Councilmember Medina,
Yes.
Mayor Taylor,
Yes.
Councilmember Iyer,
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson,
No.
Councilmember Briggs,
Yes.
Councilmember Rumlawi,
No.
Councilmember Hayner abstaining. Motion carries.
We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. To speak at public comment general time, please enter the number on your screen. That is 877-853-5247. 877-853-5247. Once you're connected, please enter meeting ID 942-1273, 2148, 942-1273, 2148. Once you are connected further, please enter *9 to indicate that you wish to speak. When it is your turn to speak, our clerk will identify you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. You'll have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. When our clerk will identify you and will let you know when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time has expired. When your time has expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at public comment?
Caller with the phone number ending in 936, do you have a comment? Phone number 936, press *6 to unmute yourself. Caller 936, go ahead.
Hello. Oh, thank you. Hello, this is Zachary Story, and I wanted to speak to Hayner and others saying that they didn't hear from any community members that this was important to address. And I don't know how many times I've called in, not just on regular council meetings, but I'm using my time to go to a couple of these other meetings and call in and speak to this. I helped organize a recall campaign, and just, I went around to local businesses just telling people, showing them the articles of what happened, and just because this was important to me, important that we address this. And I also started talking at public comment when I was homeless a couple of years ago. And Hayner's pattern of behavior of referring to a new hotel downtown, referring to it as, what are we going to call it, Shelter Views. And the services that the Delanis Center provided to me were life-saving. I got my meals there. I was able to sleep there in very cold temperatures. So this is how it's really personal to me. And I would also like to hear more about Hayner's insistence that the Michigan Daily is somehow corrupted and influenced by outside forces. That is very concerning to me. That's where I get the most of my news, and that's how I stay informed. And so I am deeply concerned that it could be compromised, and I would like Hayner to come forth with the information that he has, that the Michigan Daily somehow has some sort of ulterior motives. Because if you make a statement like that, it's your civic duty to let others know what you know, how you know it, and this is one of the main news sources in our city, so that is definitely a public interest, and I want to hear more about it. And I also want to speak to Ali Ramlawi
30 seconds.
About saying something about an emergency city manager is needed in Ann Arbor, and I'm interested to hear more about that. And I hope that you bring a resolution to council, because I would really love to hear that discussion at the council table about instituting an emergency city manager. So I challenge Ramlawi to bring that forward, and maybe we can have a public hearing about it as well, because hey, maybe it's a great idea. I don't know. I want to hear more about it and what you plan.
Thank you.
Ann Bannister.
Hello, this is Ann Bannister, a former council member, and I'm calling to express my disappointment in the council members who voted yes on this shameful, hateful, vindictive, and evil resolution, which is a thinly veiled effort by Mayor Taylor and his allies to regain a supermajority on city council and complete and total control of City Hall with only a small group of loyal puppets surrounding him. I'm listening in my head to Bob Marley's redemption song. How long will they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? I'm calling on all champions of truth, fairness, and kindness, whether they're city staff or residents or chairs or commissioners on our boards and commissions. It's time to stand up and condemn this shameful McCarthyism style rooting out of Mayor Taylor's political opponents. This is an egregious exercise of white privilege and implementation of voter suppression of Ward 1 voters and elimination of checks and balances. I ask people, who will be next? When will this standard of gotcha leadership be applied to Commissioner Jen Iyer for her conduct unbecoming a council member with regard to her various lies about her role with the Vanguard scandal, or false information on her campaign materials, or her retaliation against Tom Crawford for releasing the FOIA about her, which he did in accordance with state law? The hypocrisy of the behavior of this council runs so contrary to stated values and mission statements of Ann Arbor's civic organization. Whether it's the Women Progressive Activists, or the Ann Arbor Rotary, or the Kiwanis, a common theme of our organizations is respect and embracing the golden rule where we treat others the way we'd like to be treated. I urge the mayor and his allies to look yourselves in the mirror. Is it the truth? Is what you're doing fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill? Will it be beneficial to everyone concerned? The answer in this case is a hearty no.
30 seconds.
I urge Mayor Taylor to please stop your evil campaign of misinformation and calling people racist and homophobes and spreading misinformation and false narratives. Please stop being the seek and destroy missile you described and personified. There's so much important work to do. Please resign And Mayor Taylor and your allies, Ann Arbor needs you to resign and help the city get back on track with peace and nonviolence.
Time.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending in 127. You have a comment? Phone number 127. Press *6 to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Hi. Hello. These comments are in general pertaining to all of the committee and the commissioners. I am just appalled at the behavior in totality towards each other and the words you elect to use and how you choose to address each other and how you whine about the time wasted and your disgruntlement as to the imposition that has been placed on you. God help us if you think of the residents of Ann Arbor as you think of each other. What a mess. You are a mess. And if you don't feel comfortable or happy meeting the needs of Ann Arbor residents, whoever you might be, think about resigning, because we don't want to sit here and watch commission meetings like this and think you are our leaders, because it's very, very uncomfortable. And I'm just appalled that one of the supposedly the best cities in the United States has leadership that conducts themselves as you do. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment?
Caller with the phone number ending in 340. Go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Luis Vasquez from the First Ward. I'm thankful to you for taking these actions today. I have, contrary to some council members' statements that they have not heard from their constituents, I have sent email to all of you regarding this issue with Council Member Hayner. I have entered in, responses into the A2 Granicus as well, commenting on issues that have come before council, and specifically in regards to the egregious actions and words used by Mr. Hayner in the past. And also, I would just like to say, I feel victimized by Mr. Hayner when he claimed in an email to the mayor that I somehow had threatened him, which I never did during the January 14th meeting. But, this is indicative of somebody who is very troubled and really needs to get off of council. I'm really sorry that the recall effort did not work. But we do have an opportunity next year to once and for all tell Mr. Hayner what we really think of him and vote him off council. So once again, thank you for taking these actions today. I am appalled by some of what I've witnessed during this meeting, such as Councilmember Griswold and Hayner laughing while Jen Eyre was speaking, And also when Elizabeth Nelson just basically rolled her eyes and
30 seconds.
Just, you know, I mean, that's really disrespectful. Not just disrespectful to your colleagues, but disrespectful to this city and the community members. So please change your behaviors. Council members Nelson, Griswold, Rumlawi, and Hayner. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Beth Collins, do you have a comment?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Well, I had my little speech prepared for before the hearing, but now after listening to the hearing, I would like to just support the words of many of you, that the word does matter. And that's why I haven't called in any of the previous hearings. But I would like to say that this is something where I can't even believe that, like, Councilmember Iyer is calling this out. She's in Lexington, Virginia. If you Google it in relation to racism, in relation to sexual harassment, like, she's living in a glass house while smirking and smiling at us all while vacationing in the most white racist city in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I know this personally because I lived there for 10, 12 years. So anyway, is it okay to say that word in Lexington, Virginia, Jen? I'm sorry. Now I would like to read my written speech. My name is Beth Collins. I'm a Ward 5 resident. I am a board member of CARD Group and have known Jeff Hayner since I started being involved with the CARD Group. I know Jeff and have worked with him on a couple of other projects I will mention in a minute, but his dedication to a better cleanup for the 1,4-dioxane plume has been significant. He is always at meetings and has been instrumental in helping with this environmental mess. I also serve on Elizabeth Dean Fund Committee, and Jeff got me in touch with the Northside Food Forest for some fruit and nut trees, and we've been working with Scott Spooner at the Parks Department, because Jeff's been so involved with the parks and PAC all these years, to get the Dean Fund to support the sustainable project. It's apparent that Jeff loves this community and is always striving to improve it and help its residents. Approximately 3 years ago, Jeff and I started a fair trade campaign to make Ann Arbor a fair trade city. The pandemic arrived and we never were able to complete it, but it's still on the back burner as a project for us to continue, Jeff. I know he wants to make Ann Arbor a great community and keep Ann Arbor a great community, and he is a good person. This is not justice today. This whole week is sad. I'm sorry, my voice is all out discombobulated. I am just embarrassed that I watch city council meetings. So
30 seconds.
You and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Caller with the phone number ending in 469, go ahead.
Hi, Pedals Ward 1. Y'all, this is so sad. This is so frustrating. And the fact that Robert's rules or whatever makes it where y'all can't be real, but you just have to kind of not really acknowledge what each other's saying. Like, the level of ignorant privilege and straight up, like, deep white supremacy on display this afternoon and during every single meeting, it's crippling to the spirit. Staying calm under this level of narcissistic gaslighting. This is Stockholm Syndrome abuse, and it's impressive. It's impressive to watch Councilmember Graham just routinely, the way that, see, the thing with supremacy and privilege and patriarchy is that Councilmember Rumlawi, I bet you're not even aware of when you just walk over and talk over these women, because it's so embedded in who you are that for you, in the same way, Councilmember Hayner, it's so casual to you. You say, well, there's sometimes you can use this language, but you can't, right? Well, because you're so padded, just like Ann Arbor in this coma. America's in this coma, I mean, just watch the Nina Turner just get wiped out by the establishment, by another milquetoast pseudo-Democrat. And it's become so clear that Ann Arbor is simply not aware of its racism and its homophobia and its bigotry, and there's so little incentive for anyone to unpack. And so anyone who's listening to this, who realizes that we're just going to keep asking the oppressor for scraps until the end of time, until we radically decide that love and compassion and that creation and that stopping voting for lesser of evils and putting our money where our mouth is and stopping the running unfettered hamster wheel of unchecked capitalism and patriarchy and white old rich male straight fascist linear sausage. I mean, at some point we've got to say, you know what? Councilmember Nelson and Griswold and Ramlawi and Hayner, the fact that you are not aware of how you're coming off, the fact that you're not aware of the comments that you're saying, and Councilmember Griswold, for you to think that you're not racist, like the routine voting of no, of investing in communities, like no, fair housing, no, cheap housing, no. The fact that 88% of Ann Arbor is Asian and white, and yet 3 out of 4 are Black people are incarcerated is a problem. So you can say as much as you want that words are this or words are that, or we're not this or we're not that. Look at your behaviors. Look at the way you tense up. Imagine when you're walking down the street late at night and there's a whole group of Black boys on the other side of the street. How does that make you feel? Right? And so there's a lot of stuff to unpack. I just really, y'all, it's just, there's so much money and so much power here. There's so much incentive for us to be more than this. We can be more than this. And again, I entreat you, I'm going to send out a personal request for this, but I would love to have you all publicly have a conversation outside of this body. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment?
Mayor, I don't see anyone else on the line with their hand up.
Seeing no one, public comment is closed. Are there communications today from council? Councilmember Briggs.
Thank you. I'm going to read something. I don't know how helpful it is, but it's something I recently came upon, and it seems to have relevance to this conversation as well, because I think there seems to be some. I've heard in comments that because people have had positive interactions with Councilmember Hayner, that this doesn't reflect. We shouldn't have taken these actions. This was written by Robert Livingston. It was in the Harvard Business Review. Hopefully I'll have to. Racism has less to do with what's in your heart or mind and more to do with how your actions and inactions amplify or enable the systemic dynamics already in place. Workplace discrimination often comes from well-educated, well-intentioned, open-minded, kind-hearted people who are just floating along, severely underestimating the tug of prevailing current or their actions, positions, and outcomes. Anti-racism requires swimming against that current like a salmon making its way upstream. He suggests that establishing an anti-racist organizational culture tied to core values and modeled by behavior from top leaders at the company can influence both individual attitudes and institutional policies. And I'd shared that in relationship to another incident recently, but I think it very much comes to play in this. Our words and our actions matter, and they amplify things in our community. And it's important to call them out. It's especially important to call them out when they come from us as elected leaders.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. I just, since the caller brought this up, I just thought I would mention that I'm not actually on vacation here in Virginia. I'm here doing work as a small business owner for one of my small businesses. Thank you.
Councilmember Griswold.
I want to repeat because there have been a number of accusations made tonight. I do not believe the statement that Mr. Hayner made is appropriate, but I do not believe it rises to the occasion for us to divert this amount of energy as council members. And I also have one question because given my age, maybe I'm just not with it, but I read in the paper today, Q-A2, is that a reference to QAnon? And if so, is that about the QAnon shaman who became famous on January 6th? So anyway, I'll do a little more research on that, but I'm not familiar with this term, but it seems to refer to a white supremacist who's mentally ill. Thank you.
Further communication from council? May I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Councilmember Song, seconded by Councilmember Dis. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.
Folks.
Postman, Ms. Beaudry.